Most men aren't failing because they're weak. They're failing because they're disciplined in the wrong direction. And again, this is Greg Swanson. This is Warrior Mike podcast number 752. We're going to be talking about why modern masculinity is breaking men. So the problem no one has said out loud about, and just to pause for a second, I've been doing several podcasts on this concept of masculinity. Done it through there's a crisis in it, and then started talking about the king archetype to help with it, and then the warrior archetype. And I will get back to finishing that series with the lover archetype and magician archetype, but wanted to take a break from that and then talk about again about masculinity, because how we perceive it might be actually more of a hindrance than a help. And so the thing is that modern masculinity isn't broken, it's misdirected. Men are confused, they're conflicted. Like, should I be this or should I be that? Confused is, I don't know who I should be. Conflicted is, I don't know, is this who this person wants me to be, or is this who I should be in front of my boss? Is this who I should be in front of my wife? So there's a lot of conflict as to what masculinity means with men today. Old models don't survive modern pressure, right? You go back to the 50s and, it was very chauvinistic, but it was a model that somewhat worked for a while there. And then the 60s. And so those old models really don't survive, but a lot of people are falling back on them. Well, men in my day, in the 20s and the 50s and the 30s, those things don't work anymore. And so nobody has really updated through their own living and teaching to help men today, and even young men understand what masculinity is, because if they don't, society is going to put pressure on them, and they're going to conform to what society thinks modern masculinity is. And so the issue is internal fragmentation, not lack of effort, meaning there's too many pieces going on. It's fragmented. What masculinity means is, it's like a china bowl. It dropped, and it's a million pieces, and it's not that there's the effort there. It's just, where do these pieces fit? And so the three masculinity traps that are awaiting you, if you're not having fallen into it already, is most men get pulled into one of these three: dominance, passivity, and hustle. Probably sounds right for most of us out there. We can put ourselves, if we haven't had conscious training and some other things, we probably fall into one of these. So the dominance masculinity is power without stability, meaning the person's all over the place. In archetypal realm, you could call this the tyrant as opposed to the king. But they have this power, or they try to exude this power, but they're not stable. They're not grounded. So emotions go all over the place. The volume of the conversation goes all over the place, and there's just a disarray of things happening. And they control mistakes for confidence. So the person thinks that they can control something, and they think they're confident, but it's really not. So control cannot be mistaken for confidence. And this is what, when we look at exhibiting these things, when we try to control stuff, we're hoping that people will see us as confident, but it's not. It's just controlling, especially when we try to control external factors. And then suppression is mistaken for discipline. So we keep our feelings, we bury them down. You have to be, don't share it. Well, some people think that's disciplined, but it's just suppression, and that doesn't work either. And then anger as a substitute for self-command, right? When we get angry, it's usually something that has pinched a nerve or struck a button within us, and we get angry, but we use that as opposed to self-command, like, what am I feeling? Where am I going? We have to name it to tame it. And so we use anger by default. So we try to control, we suppress some of our emotions, and then the anger comes out as, instead of self-command. And so if your strength collapses under resistance, it was never strength in the first place. So then there's the passive nice guy masculinity. We all know those, or we all have fallen into those shoes once in a while. Avoidance is disguised as a virtue. I'm going to avoid conflict. I'm going to avoid this. I'm going to avoid that. I don't like, conflicts. I don't like debates. I don't like this. And oh, you're so virtuous. No, it's disguised as virtue, but it's just avoiding a situation because they don't know how to handle it. They haven't been trained with it. And then conflict avoidance, right? This is just one of the big ones. Boundary erosions. When we are the nice guy, we don't have any no's. So somebody calls you up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Hey, can you drive me to the airport? Sure, no problem. Hey, my lawnmower broke. Would you mind cutting my grass? Sure, no problem. Hey, the snow fell. Could you shovel? Right? And there's no boundaries at all. They just say yes, 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 yes to everything. And then resentment builds up because they've allowed themselves, this nice guy, allowed themselves to be walked on. And then they start to resent everybody for walking on them when in reality, they didn't set the boundaries to protect themselves. And so harmless is not the same as strong, meaning, oh, I'm a harmless guy. I'm nice guy. I'm harmless. It doesn't equate to being strong, strength. And I'm not just talking about physical. I'm talking about mental, emotional, and spiritual as well. And then there's the hustle masculinity, right? Performance without presence. Like they're just performing all over the place. If you're a salesperson, you're making 1,000 calls, but you're not present. You're going over here, you're going over there. You get in the car, you have to make this sales call over here, do that. Or if you're a athlete, you're just trying to do the best you can with you not even knowing what state you're in or what venue you're in. And so with this particular case, worth is tied to output, and the output is the overriding factor, not the process that got the output. And burnout is normalized. Like, yeah, everybody burns out, no big deal, but it's not, right? Burnout can be prevented by, a lot of other things that I've talked about in other podcasts, but, having your own physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual rituals to help you will alleviate burnout. And then the identity outsourced to achievement. So I am a athlete. I am a salesperson. I am a top performer. When you do that, when you have that identity there, you have to keep that going because if that falters, then who are you? And so when I work with clients, it's not, no, you're not a salesperson, you're not a top achiever. You are a person in sales who achieved top performance. It sounds minor, but it is a big, big difference. And so we want motion without orientation is just exhaustion, right? So you get people who just go all over the place. They may make their numbers or they may write 10 books in one day, but it's not founded in grounded energy and it's probably far less than adequate results in those things. So what actually replaces these models? Self-command. Emotional regulation, not suppression. So emotional regulation means we have to know the emotion we're feeling, name it to tame it. We don't suppress it. We're able to not blow up like a volcano, but we want to be able to regulate it and let people know what we are feeling. And discipline, not compulsion. Like compulsion, I got to do it. I got to do it over. I have to run 10 miles every day, 10 miles every day. Otherwise, people aren't going to look at me the same way. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about discipline. I go to the gym at this time and I do this because I enjoy it, because I know what's working for me. It's not a compulsion like an addiction per se. So we want to have that discipline. And then we want to have internal standards, which I usually call a code of honor, not external validation, meaning that you have your standards you're going to live by. It doesn't matter if people acknowledge it or not, if anybody notices it or not. A warrior, especially a conscious warrior, has their internal standards that guide and direct them every single day. It guides their thoughts, their actions, their beliefs. That is what's going to take place over the external validation, because external validation will come and go, and the person who depends on it doesn't know what they should do next because nobody's acknowledged me for 5 weeks. What should I do? But if you have your internal standards and you stay with them, that's the most important. That's your compass. And the strength that holds under pressure, right? This is that self-command. This strength is what holds when you are under pressure. The emotional regulation, discipline, internal standards will always be there. And so the cost of getting masculinity wrong, why this matters than most men really realize. Psychologically, instability. Yes, not going crazy, but we feel like we're going crazy. We have too many decisions. We have too many things to think about. We get confused. We lose track of mind. We drink 10 Red Bulls because we're up all night worrying about stuff, right? This is what happens. We get this psychological instability. And sometimes it can turn to depression. It can turn to mental illness, but that would be at the far extreme. At the lesser extreme is we don't know what we should do. We're worried about all the variables that we can't control, and then we don't aren't able to think correctly, right? Because it's our brains aren't wired that way. And then there's relational distance. We separate ourselves from our family and our friends because of when this masculinity goes wrong. We pull back, we retreat, we create some space, but that space is actually a gap, and that gap needs to be filled, otherwise it's going to grow. And then there's this existential drift, which again is just part of yourself moving away from who you know you should be. And so these are the things that can really affect men that really doesn't come up in conversations. So most breakdowns aren't sudden, they're cumulative, right? So a person has a breakdown, a burnout, whatever. It doesn't happen in one day. It may happen 5 years, but you can see it. You can notice when you're aware of the signs, you can really notice that. And when I work with executives on this, there's a checklist I go through and go, how long are you feeling this? Go, you keep doing that, in 2 years, you're going to be out of a job or you're going to be collapsed, the predictability of it. So when we know the signs, we can then start taking action. And that's what I hope this podcast will help you do, is take notice of where you are on these things and then reach out to me or to a coach or a therapist and get some help with it. So modern masculinity rebuilt, right, is identify before behavior. Your identity, who you think you are in a positive sense, will determine what you do. You don't just do the behavior and then go, that was me. So that means that you have your internal governance first, your internal discipline comes first, which is your identity. If I am this type of a person, that's your internal governor, and then your behavior will follow. And coherence over performance. So coherence is you're aware, you're doing things correctly, you're doing them in alignment with your code of honor. You are all of that, as opposed to just performing for the sake of performing. And integration, not extremes. We can go to emotional extremes and social extremes and others extremes. We don't want to go to these extremes. It's integration. This reminds me of the Enneagrams, right? We have these 9 Enneagrams, and there are these personality behaviors that come along. And the key part of the Enneagram is integrate those different numbers into it, not to swing like a pendulum from one number to another. Ultimately, we go up the path of self-development, and we want to integrate all of that together. And I had put out the Alpha Blueprint, which you can find on the website, which I'll tell you in a few seconds, which goes through a lot of this. It's how to be an alpha without being a jerk, basically. But the Alpha Blueprint goes through many of these things that we're talking about, and it'll help you become aware of where you are on this area of masculinity. So modern masculinity is not about returning to the past or surrendering to the present. It's about integration, strength without brutality, sensitivity without collapse, and discipline without self-erasure. A man anchored in self-command does not need to dominate, disappear, or exhaust himself to feel worthy. So if you want to see the show notes on this podcast, you can visit warriormindcoach.com. While you're there, you can find more information on other blog posts and podcasts, and you can request your power strategy call there as well. Since you'll be on the internet, please follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, all under Warrior Mind Coach.